The heat went off sometime in the night, and most people didn't notice until morning. By then, the indoor temperature had already dropped 8 degrees. That gap, the hours between failure and awareness, is where most apartment survival scenarios begin to go wrong. A modern apartment feels stable. It has walls, a roof, running water, a stove. It signals safety in a way a forest or a flooded road simply doesn't. That signal is real, but it's also partial, and in a prolonged grid failure, the gap matters. The building itself starts losing stored heat almost immediately after the heating system cuts. Concrete and drywall hold warmth for a while, but they are not insulation, they are thermal mass. In a well-sealed apartment, that mass buys you somewhere between 6 and 18 hours of livable temperature. After that, the rate of heat loss depends on outside temperature, floor level, window quality, and wind. Ground floor units and corner apartments, exposed on 2 or more sides, lose heat faster. A top floor unit under a poorly insulated roof can drop faster than mid-building units. These aren't dramatic differences early on, but by hour 36 they compound. Most people assume the cold will feel sudden. It doesn't. It creeps through the floor first, then rises through the air near the windows. The body compensates quietly, adding layers, moving more, making tea if the gas is still on. That compensation response is useful, but it also delays the moment people start making real decisions. The first real resource question in a winter grid failure isn't food or water, it's heat, and specifically, how long you can maintain a safe core temperature inside the space you have. Hypothermia doesn't require outdoor exposure. It requires only that the body loses heat faster than it can generate it. In a cold apartment with no heating, that threshold can arrive in under 24 hours for older adults or young children. For a healthy adult in moderate clothing, the risk builds more slowly, but it builds. The instinct is to wait it out, which is often correct in short outages. The problem is knowing when short has already ended without you deciding it had. Utilities rarely announce how long a failure will last, and in a major grid event, estimates are often wrong. By the time official guidance shifts from a few hours to possibly days, indoor temperatures in vulnerable apartments have already changed. The apartment itself becomes an active variable, not a stable base. Water is the second quiet problem. In sustained freezing conditions, pipes can freeze within 12 to 24 hours. This depends on pipe location, building construction, and whether any heat source remains in the building at all. Pipes inside exterior walls, which describes many apartment kitchens and bathrooms, are most exposed. Most people don't think about water until the tap runs dry or pressure drops. By that point, filling containers, which takes 30 seconds before a freeze, is no longer an option. Stored water buys time. A bathtub filled early can hold roughly 80 gallons, not for drinking without treatment, but for sanitation. Drinking water needs to be stored separately in clean containers, ideally before conditions deteriorate. The body needs roughly 2 liters per day at rest, more if you're active or layering heavily and sweating. Food matters less in the short term than most people expect. The body has reserves. The nervous system doesn't. Decision quality begins to degrade at sustained cold, low-calorie intake, and poor sleep, all of which arrive together. By day 2 of a significant winter grid failure, a person in an under-resourced apartment is making decisions while already compromised. That's the real architecture of the problem, not one dramatic crisis, but a slow convergence of small depletions. Light is one that people consistently underestimate. Darkness changes spatial awareness, mood, and the ability to assess problems accurately. A phone flashlight and a low battery are not a lighting strategy. They are a temporary delay. Candles produce real light, but also carbon monoxide risk in enclosed spaces. Ventilation matters even when it costs warmth. The apartment by day 3 is a different environment than the one you moved into. Surfaces are cold to the touch. Breath is visible near the windows. Motivation has quietly dropped. This isn't weakness, it's physiology. Cold suppresses the motivation systems before it touches conscious thought. People in sustained cold environments report feeling fine while making objectively worse decisions. They misjudge distance, underestimate time, skip steps they would normally catch. The body is prioritizing core temperature over cognitive performance, a trade it makes without asking. One of the most consistent mistakes in this scenario is the comfort of the sleeping bag. People climb in early, stay horizontal, and reduce activity, which feels like conservation but can accelerate the cold problem. Stillness reduces metabolic heat output. A person at rest generates roughly 80 watts of body heat. Light movement, even pacing, can more than double that output without burning significant calories. The sleeping bag is valuable. The decision to stay in it all day in a dropping apartment is not. Layering logic matters more than most people realize going in. The goal isn't to add as many layers as possible. The goal is to trap air close to the body. Wool and synthetic insulation retain warmth even when damp. Cotton loses nearly all insulating value when wet. Sweating inside heavy layers creates moisture against the skin, which then accelerates heat loss, the opposite of the goal. Thin base layer, insulating mid-layer, wind-blocking outer layer, even inside, manages this better than piling on blankets alone. The kitchen becomes a decision point that carries real risk if handled carelessly. A gas stove can provide heat in short bursts, but it is not a space heater and should never be used as one. Carbon monoxide is colorless, odorless, and produces symptoms: headache, confusion, nausea. That can be mistaken for cold-related fatigue. In a sealed winter apartment, the margin between warming the room and creating a toxic atmosphere is narrower than it feels. A battery-powered carbon monoxide detector is one of the few pieces of equipment that earns its place unconditionally. Neighbors matter more in this scenario than most urban residents instinctively consider. Shared body heat across a group, even 2 or 3 people in one room, changes the thermal math of the space significantly. A single occupied room, sealed with towels at the door gaps, retains heat from occupants better than a whole apartment left open. Consolidating into one room, ideally interior and mid-building, is one of the highest value decisions available in the first 24 hours. It costs nothing and buys meaningful time before conditions require a harder choice. The harder choice is whether to stay or leave, and it is almost always delayed too long. Leaving feels like defeat. The apartment represents stability, belongings, familiar space. The psychological cost of walking out is real, and it causes people to revise their threat assessment downward to justify staying. This is normalcy bias operating under physical stress, and it is difficult to detect from inside it. The actual question isn't whether the apartment feels safe, it's whether it can maintain a survivable temperature for the duration of the event. If the answer becomes uncertain by day 2, the options available on day 3 are already fewer. Warming centers, shelters, a neighbor's building with a generator, a family member further from the outage zone. All of these require mobility. Mobility requires energy. Energy depletes faster in the cold. Leaving while physically capable is a different calculation than leaving when you're already fatigued and hypothermic. The window for making that decision comfortably is shorter than the emotional timeline most people are operating on. This is what makes the apartment scenario genuinely dangerous. Not that it's immediately lethal, but that it slowly removes options. Each hour of dropping temperature, depleting battery, draining water, and degrading decision quality narrows what's still possible. The apartment doesn't turn hostile all at once. It turns inconvenient, then uncomfortable, then genuinely risky across a timeline most people don't track. Preparation before that timeline begins. Stored water, emergency lighting, a warm layer set aside, a plan that includes leaving, changes the entire shape of the problem. Not because survival requires gear, but because every resource you don't have to improvise under cold and fatigue is cognitive capacity preserved. The mind under cold, under low calories, under poor sleep, is already working harder than it appears to be. Anything that reduces the decisions it has to make in real time is meaningful. Real emergencies of this kind vary significantly by city infrastructure, building age, and personal health. Local emergency management guidance and trained professionals are always the more reliable resource. What the apartment actually offers in a grid failure is time. Not safety, time. How that time gets used in the first 12 hours determines what options remain at hour 48. The space doesn't save you. What you do inside it, and when you decide to leave it, does.